As we take a look at this headline number, it blew the roof off, and everybody had an initial freak out this morning. But the other thing that Jason said, and he tweeted this, was he went from the stages of shock to nervousness to then relief as he realized this actually was pretty good news, seeing that wages did not spiral even as payrolls advanced far more than anybody expected. The thing is, you've been making the case, Jared, for stable, steady growth. When numbers blow the doors off like this, how is that possible?
Well, it's interesting to hear Jason's travel through the 3 stages of an upside jobs number. I think that's interesting, and very much share that. I mean, one of the things you have to do in a report like this is, of course, get under the hood. Jason's good at that. It's certainly one of the things we do at CEA. And I think you mentioned the wage story. I think there's still some cooling there. But also, even if you just look at the top-line job numbers, I mean, you have to average over a few months to take out some of the bips and bops of the noisy high-frequency data. 266,000 jobs per month over the past 3 months. Go back a year from now. That number was north of 400K. So any plot that you've seen today of, say, a 3-month rolling average of job gains is basically trending down. But what we want to see is some easing in the job market, but still strong enough to give consumers the buying power they need. And I think that's pretty much exactly what we got today.
Well, Jared, some easing is one thing. A sudden deterioration would be something else, and especially considering this data is backward-looking at the month of September when student loan payments had not been resumed yet. We weren't yet over the child care cliff. The UAW strike only started halfway through the month, and we're still looking potentially in mid-November at the risk of a government shutdown. How concerned are you about that cocktail of headwinds that could be coming for this labor market and this economy more generally all at the same time?
Every economy has headwinds and tailwinds. We have very strong tailwinds that we just talked about in my first set of remarks, and I'm sure you've been talking about all day when it comes to the jobs report. I mean, look, we have a 70% consumer spending economy, and we have an unemployment rate that's been below 4% for 20 months in a row, and we're still generating gangbuster job numbers. That is a very strong tailwind. Now, against that, you have to take the headwinds as they come. This has been an extremely resilient economy, and it has batted off headwinds much stronger than the ones you just took us through. I mean, look, student debt restart, that is absolutely a challenge for families who are facing that restart. But I think if you look at it at the macro level, our calculation is that that's something to the tune of around $4 billion a month or $48 billion a year. That is a very tiny share of $18 trillion of consumer spending over the year. So you have to look at these things in context. You have to consider a $26 trillion economy. You talk about a few strikes, no question about it. We're actually glad to see labor flexing its muscle, but if you tot up all those workers, they're less than 0.1% of the labor force. So I think we have to keep in mind the general aggregates in which we're talking about here.
I don't know if you count the UAW strike as one of those strikes, Jared, but we've got analysis coming out of Bloomberg Economics today that says if this became a full-bore labor action, it could mean as many as 700,000 job losses, 5 jobs lost for each striking worker, as we try to get to the ancillary impact of this job market. What are you modeling at the White House? Because we keep hearing next month's jobs report will look a lot different than this one.
Well, first of all, it is the case that any of the strikers from the UAW were not included in the September report because of when that survey gets fielded. However, thus far, that strike has been somewhat surgical. As we know, there's 150,000 UAW workers, and I think the number on strike is somewhere between 20, maybe 25, and 30 thus far. So we'll have to see that as it unfolds. Look, there's no question that a longer and deeper strike has greater economic implications. But look, I think we have to take this as it comes. I don't really, that 700,000 number sounds awfully inflated to me, and I don't think that we should overblow the headwinds that are out there just because, if it bleeds, it leads. I think we have to have a clear-eyed, open, just a clear-eyed, open-minded look at this headwind-tailwind trade-off. And, as I've mentioned, I think this strength of I think the strength of the tailwinds have surpassed those of the headwinds. Now, look, I'm an economist at the White House. You might say that's motivated reasoning. I would point you towards the data. I would point you towards the jobs data. I'd point you towards today's jobs data. I would point you towards Q3 expectations for GDP. I mean, it's kind of like what Jason was saying earlier. I mean, he's looking, and I think as any responsible economist should, for reasons to, worry, and I do that too, and he's just having he's finding himself having to get to yes. And I think that's a reasonable place to be.
Jared, obviously, as you at the White House are looking at headwinds and tailwinds, the Federal Reserve is doing the same. And I know you will not comment directly on Federal Reserve policy. They operate independently from the White House and the administration. That is understood. The bond market, though, is reacting to what it thinks this Federal Reserve is going to do. And we have seen some pretty dramatic moves, the cost of borrowing moving substantially higher. What do you think the appropriate response to that is? Do you assess the bond market moves as maybe being accurate in terms of for how long rates will stay high?
Well, I think it's just, that really fits into the headwind discussion. I've been focusing on real rates, which of course have gone from something, if you look at the 10-year real rate, that's gone from -1 to a little bit north of +2. And you've seen the impact that has on mortgage rates as well, which is in the mid-7s. And look, that's going to obviously put a damper on interest rate sensitive parts of the economy. And that's just part of the world we live in. And the Fed has very much a job to do, and they've been doing it. I'm not going to comment on that, as you said. But I consider that to be one on the list, and what you have to do is tick through the implications of that. Is it dampening labor demand? Well, certainly not in the September report. Now, as you say, so here we are in October, that's September, so you can call it backward looking, and I wouldn't disagree with you. But I think that if we've learned anything, it's that it's extremely challenging to look around a corner right now. So I think we have to look at the numbers that we know, the ones that are in hand, and I think they're quite consistent with the story I've been telling you today, which is tailwinds over headwinds. I also think that the consumer story is one with some momentum. So there I will look around a corner a bit. I think if you've been sustaining an unemployment rate this low for this long, you're starting to see wages beat prices. That's been the case in the past few months. I think that's a positive forward-looking indicator.